It's 2 in the afternoon on Thursday, September 4th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories we are following at this hour. Seoul and Washington roll out plans to form a joint army unit by early next year. Officials say the division will help deter threats from North Korea. Will Samsung's new Galaxy Note 4 be the savior in boosting slumping profits in its mobile division? The tech giant unveils a few new models at the IFA Tech Fair in Berlin. And Ukraine's prime minister slams the Russian president's plan for the path toward ceasefire in eastern Ukraine, calling it a deceptive tactic to avoid international sanctions. Our top story this afternoon, Seoul and Washington will establish a combined division of their troops next year with the task of carrying out wartime operations. South Korea's defense ministry says if formed, the unit would be a first of its kind around the world. It will be set up in the first half of next year and be headed by a major general-level U.S. officer. Details on the new unit's missions are not available, but officials say at wartime it would be tasked with carrying out special operations such as eliminating weapons of mass destruction and civil missions against North Korea. The ministry expects the new joint division to improve the allies' deterrence posture and boost their military capabilities to carry out joint operations. Now, following the brutal killing of 2 of its citizens by Islamic State militants, the U.S. leaders have responded with outrage. President Barack Obama has vowed to, quote-unquote, degrade and destroy the killers, a pledge that was echoed by Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. Here's our Hwang Sung-hee with more.
So the bottom line is this. Our objective is clear. And that is to degrade and destroy ISIL so that it's no longer a threat, not just to Iraq, but also to the region and to the United States.
Following U.S. President Barack Obama's pledge to destroy Islamic State on Wednesday, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel outlined the dangers posed by the terror group. In an interview with CNN, Hagel called IS something we have never seen before and added his job as Secretary of Defense is not to second-guess what may be or what's going to be. Pointing out that Islamic State controls half of Iraq and Syria today, the U.S. defense chief said Washington will do everything possible to destroy the group's capacity to inflict harm on the American people and values. Earlier this week, President Obama said he would send 350 additional troops to Iraq to protect U.S. interests in Baghdad and in the north of the country after another American journalist was killed by Islamic State. While a fresh battle against the extremists seems inevitable, Pentagon officials estimate the weapons, fuel, and other expenses are costing the U.S. around $225 million a month. And that could be a difficult challenge for President Obama, who now has to reverse one of the key tenets of his 2 presidential campaigns, that money once spent on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan would be redirected to nation building at home. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
It's Russia's plan to deceive the West ahead of the NATO summit, says Ukraine's prime minister. That was the response to Russian President Vladimir Putin's proposal for holding an agreed ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. Our Son Jang-in has more.
Following a phone call with Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko on Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin unveiled a 7-point ceasefire plan to end the bloody conflict in eastern Ukraine. Stating his views on the conflict were very similar to those of Poroshenko, Putin said the plan included a halt to separatist fire, a pullback of Ukrainian forces, an end to airstrikes, and the establishment of a humanitarian aid passage. Poroshenko, for his part, said he and Putin shared a mutual understanding on steps to ensure peace in the region, adding that he expected a substantive dialogue on reconciliation to take place during talks in Minsk on Friday. However, Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk dismissed the ceasefire plan, saying it was an attempt to deceive the West about Moscow's real intentions. With growing skepticism, France has also expressed its disapproval by delaying the delivery of 2 Navy assault ships to Russia. The UN says more than 1 million people have been uprooted from their homes and many more may follow, as it doesn't look like the dark clouds of war will lift anytime soon. 손정인, Arirang News.
On the economic front, the Korean government has identified boosting consumer spending as the best option to break out of its low-growth trap. The latest data underline the need for urgent steps to raise household income as money is funneling out of the hands of families at an alarming pace. Our Song Ji-sun has the details.
Despite the need to boost domestic demand, Korean consumers are not earning enough to increase spending, as the corporate sector is sucking up an increasingly large share of the wealth generated by the country. Although it's a global trend that households face an uphill battle against corporations in terms of their proportion of a national income, the gap between the two sectors is widening much faster in Korea, according to data released on Thursday by the National Assembly's Budget Office. Households accounted for just over 62% of Korea's gross national income in 2012, down more than 8 percentage points from 1995. That pace of loss is twice as fast as the OECD average. On the other hand, Korea's corporate sector increased its share of GNI by nearly 7 percentage points over the same period, 4 times higher than the OECD average. The parliamentary office attributed the fast decrease in the Korean household share to poor performances by individually run businesses and dwindling interest income. Bank of Korea figures show that households' net interest earnings fell more than 75% to $4 billion over the last decade, when the corporate sector shed its interest burden by about 55%. To help increase the share of household income, the government is drawing up a package of measures that include revisions to the tax law, but some experts say encouraging investment should also be part of the plan.
To facilitate domestic spending, policies that encourage hiring or wage hikes should be promoted so that households actually gain disposable income.
The Park Geunhye administration has emphasized that boosting domestic demand is at the heart of its policies to revitalize the economy. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, citing recent economic indicators, Korea's finance minister warned last week that the nation had entered the early stages of deflation. But as our Hwang Ji-hye reports, many experts seem to disagree, saying the economy could be doing better and will not face deflationary danger anytime soon.
Korea's inflation rate has remained below the 2% level for nearly 2 years. The latest consumer price index has also pointed to a slowdown from a recent pickup. The index rose at its slowest pace in 4 months, rising 1.4% in August from a year ago. That also falls far below the central bank's inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5%. But many experts say the domestic economy running a low inflation rate does not mean it's headed for deflation.
When we say deflation, it means a minus inflation rate is continuing for such a prolonged period of time that people's expected inflation rate also turns to minus. So it's too early to talk about deflation.
They add that the focus should be on the nation's core inflation rate, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, and that index actually grew at the fastest pace in 2.5 years last month at 2.4%. Experts say Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan had political reasons for raising concerns about deflation.
There is a lot of fiscal policy that the government wants to engage in. For example, changes in the welfare policy, measures to try to invigorate some new industries. But that's all being held in status at the National Assembly. So I think this was his way to try to shock the National Assembly into moving on some of these issues.
Che's comments also pressured the Bank of Korea to further lower its key interest rate with this month's monetary policy meeting just around the corner. But as concerns linger over the nation's mounting household debt problem, experts say it's likely the central bank will hold off a rate cut this month. The bank lowered the key rate to 2.25% in August, the first rate cut since May last year. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Global shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. President Park Geunhye has made clear her stance that excessive and outdated regulations are preventing the nation from reaching its full potential. The remarks were made at a meeting on Wednesday. Here's our presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun with the details.
내년 중에는 그런 쪽들은 좀 허용이 될 수 있도록 이렇게 하겠습니다.
내년이요?
예, 이 법을 개정을 좀 해야 되는 상입니다. 본법을.
저기 오염시키는 그것이 경미할 경우에는 허용할 수도 있다 그런 규정도 있다면서요?
Following up on the government's deregulation efforts, President Park impelled officials to actively carry through the reforms. She urged the government and parliament to swiftly pass related bills so that Korea doesn't miss an opportunity to pull itself out from an economic slowdown. The government said it has nearly completed 4/5 of the reforms from March, while about a dozen others await parliamentary approval. For instance, a regulation that required employers to report to both the Labor and Justice ministries about changes made to contracts with foreign employees was lifted, simplifying the hiring process. Laws have been revised to allow food trucks to operate inside amusement parks with hopes to offer more startup opportunities, create jobs, and diversified food culture. The president, who postponed the follow-up 2 weeks ago to give officials more time to complete the reforms, couldn't stress enough the need to achieve tangible results.
먼저 많은 것을 하겠다고 계획만 발표하기보다는 하나의 규제라도 제대로 풀어서 국민들이 그 효과를 피부로 느끼도록 해야 합니다.
For her deregulation drive to maintain its momentum and start unleashing growth, President Park called for incentives and penalties regarding reforms for public employees and better cooperation between the central and local governments. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Cigarette prices in Korea are noticeably low compared to other countries, but that may change soon if the government has its way as it tries to lower the nation's smoking rate. Here's our Shin Se-min with this next story.
The average cost for a pack of cigarettes in Korea currently stands at around $2.50, the lowest in the OECD, but smokers could soon find themselves paying around $2 more. The government and ruling Saenuri Party have come to an agreement on raising cigarette prices in a bid to reduce the nation's current smoking rate of 37.6% to 29% by the year 2020. The price hike would narrow the gap between Korea and the OECD average, which is $6.40. The low cost of cigarettes in Korea has been blamed on Korea's high smoking rate, which is the second highest among the 34 OECD member nations, behind only Greece. Making them more expensive, experts say, will have an effect particularly on younger Koreans who are not economically independent. A quarter of high school students admit to having used tobacco at least once in their lives. Studies show that raising the price of cigarettes also has an effect on people who are economically independent. The consensus among global researchers is that a 10% increase in the price of cigarettes results in a 3 to 5% reduction in the smoking rate. When the Korean government instituted a price hike of around 50 cents for a pack of cigarettes in 2004, the smoking rate dropped by 14%. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
So it's out. Samsung has unveiled 4 new handset models, including the Galaxy Note 4 in Berlin. The initial reactions seem to be positive, but who knows what Apple will bring to its media event next week. Our Park Ji-won has more.
Samsung Electronics has pulled the curtain back on 4 new models, including its new flagship, the Galaxy Note 4. It comes with a 5.7-inch Super AMOLED display and a 16-megapixel camera with an optical image stabilization function. And unlike its predecessor, the Galaxy Note 3, the new version features a sleek metal frame design.
The Galaxy Note 4 will continue to set industry standard for how smartphones should help our lives become more enriched, more enjoyable, and more efficient.
Another new phone, the Galaxy Note Edge, is also catching the attention of industry insiders, namely for having a display screen that extends to the right edge of the phone, which can be used to show a scrollable panel of information.
For me, the most curious thing is Galaxy Edge, because I heard some rumors, but it was years ago. It was the most, the best device for me.
Samsung also unveiled a virtual reality headset and its new Gear S smartwatch model in Berlin. The releases come 1 week before Apple is expected to show off its iPhone 6 to the world. The speculation is that it will have a larger screen, similar in size to Samsung phones, and maintain the two rivals' heated competition in the global market. Park Geunhye, Arirang News.
Now, but raining on Samsung's parade a bit was news that the company has been ordered to cough up more than 35 million euros or roughly $46 million in fines to the European Union. Now, that's for the alleged price fixing of microcard chips used in mobile phones. An investigation into 3 companies, including Samsung and Philips, began in 2008, and the European Commission says they colluded between 2003 and 2005. Samsung's fine has been reduced, though, by 30% for cooperating with the investigators. Philips, in the meantime, plans to appeal, saying they firmly believe the claims are unfounded. We are living in an era where IT technology is evolving faster than we realize. It's making many parts of our lives more convenient, and that includes education. With more universities joining in on the movement for open online courses, our UDN reports on what education might look like in the future.
Learn everywhere, anywhere. That's now possible thanks to the power of technology, more specifically through cloud-based interconnectivity, which allows students to take classes online through multiple electronic devices. Massive open online courses, or MOOCs, have seen explosive growth in the past 2 years. A group of experts and founders of MOOC services gathered in Seoul physically and virtually on Wednesday to talk about why the paradigm shift in education has come at precisely the right time.
We also have a whole new generation of students. They are very individualistic, and it's oftentimes easier to text and tweet and Snapchat and WhatsApp and Facebook your children than it is to talk to them in person.
The online education world is also evolving through the use of big data.
The maximum student engagement was when videos were 6 minutes long. So we can gather data and answer some of these questions about how are students learning, what resources are most valued by students, how should we teach. So our hope is that with this big data of learning, we can begin to answer some of these questions.
While the method in which education is being provided is important, so is the content themselves. There's now a stronger call to digitize textbooks as well.
Textbooks are a billion-dollar market globally, and yet they seem to confound attempts to digitize them. I actually think that if anything should have been digitized first in our culture, it really should have been educational books, textbooks.
The online courses are particularly appealing for people who cannot afford to attend university. But pundits say a day where most of ordinary students attend online lectures while reading a digitalized textbook written by a professor that's halfway across the world may come sooner than expected. UDN, Arirang News.
All right, they may look like just a pair of legs, but this robot we are about to show you has a name. It's Akira's, or the actively coordinated high-speed image processing experiment system. It's one of the fastest bipedal robots in the world. Now, created by roboticists at the University of Tokyo's Ishikawa Watanabe laboratory, its 14-centimeter-long gams can dash up to 4.3 kilometers per hour, or about 6 steps per second, and can even perform a somersault. Akira's also features a high-speed camera and a stabilizing motor that allow it to lean forward without tipping over. The Korean demilitarized zone is a place of heartbreak and devastation for many, but our Im Hyun-hee joins us today with an event that offers somewhat of a different perspective. Good afternoon, Hyun-hee.
Good afternoon, right. So the DMZ, many people visit as tourists because it's a very unique place where two countries are at a continual standoff, basically, with each other. So obviously there are very strong emotions tied to the DMZ, and with strong emotions comes potential for art. So take a look.
An area of Korea littered with remnants of the Korean War. On the fringe of the 38th parallel north, you wouldn't expect to find much at the Korean demilitarized zone, except for maybe skeletons of the destruction that divided a nation. So what would a collection of art be doing in an area like this? Argentinian artist Adrian Villarrojas shows that the Korean DMZ is in fact a fitting place for artistic inspiration, and he responds with a collection of art.
I absolutely fell in love with the place, and I had this sort of ambitious idea of use the town as a theater, and as a huge studio.
And he's not the only artist to do so. Cellist Lee Kyung fills the air with her music, an unexpected venue for the beautiful notes of the classical instrument. And artist Tomas Araceno's works includes a beautiful scene of the mountains of Korea, even including peaks from North Korea. Titled Degrees of Freedom, the binocular telescope captures a 360-degree view and the sentiments of many. These are just a few of the artists who are part of this year's Real DMZ project, a contemporary art project based on research conducted on the DMZ that brings a unique perspective of artists from all over the world.
And this is fascinating for me, to try an exhibition that explores the field between politics and the art.
It's a project that experiments with unique productions and exhibitions and aims to bring awareness to the real DMZ.
Right, so many artists actually were saying they view this as like a paradox almost, because at one hand it's beautiful, absolutely lush, gorgeous trees and scenery, but on the other hand the tension is very real, they said, and so it makes for a unique dynamic when they create their work.
And is it the first time that this particular project is taking place?
Actually, so they've been doing this since 2012, so in collaboration with the contemporary art gallery called the Art Sonje Gallery here in Seoul, they have been putting on this project for a few years now, and it's been growing, and it really has been bringing in artists from both in Korea and from abroad, and so really different perspectives on what different artists view in terms of the DMZ, in terms of what they call the real DMZ.
And you were telling me that it even serves as a project, or it plans to serve as a project?
Right, so they want it to be more than just art, they want it to be research as well. So they view their artwork as a potential for research for the future, and for people to share this with the global audience as well. And so with each project, with each creation they make, they wanted to share it with other people around the world and to show them, what is really going on in their perspective here in the DMZ. And so it's a very unique opportunity to see the awareness of, or to spread awareness of the DMZ and the situation there.
And the weather, if the weather permits, it will be a good outing to get a feel of what the DMZ surrounding area looks like.
Right, so the projects are scattered here and there. It'd be for a nice hike.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Yunhee, for your story today.
You're very welcome.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. After all that rain, we are finally seeing the sunshine, and temperatures also have risen drastically. However, there is a nice breeze as well, which is keeping things rather fall-like. And we are looking at cloudy skies nationwide right now, and mainly due to a high pressure front. And some regions down south are seeing on and off drizzles here and there. Now going over to our readings, Seoul will top out at 28 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan are on the hot side as well, peaking up to 28 as well. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops to 27, while Dokdo hits in the mid-20s, while Mangkeungang shoots up high at 28. Now that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Hyun-kyung.
All right, thank you very much, Michelle, for that. That brings us to the end of our newscast. I will be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.